Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be on with you.
No, it's a pleasure having you. I mean, it's an honor. Obviously, you cover the New York Yankees for MLB.com. I'm sure every Yankee fan out there has read your articles since you've been doing it since 2007. And of course, they can follow you on Twitter and Instagram at Bryan Hoch. And again, any Yankee fan worth their salt should be following you because you're on the nose of all the big Yankee stories. And of course, we're here to discuss your latest book that's just out now, July 11th, 62, Aaron Judge, the New York Yankees in the Pursuit of Greatness. What was the moment or moments you realized I'm writing this book?
I'll tell you what. All right. So if you remember last season, around July, Judge went into the All-Star break. I believe he had about 31 home runs. And I started saying, like, man, 62 is within reach. Like, he's off to a great start. The team is playing fantastic. There's a story here to tell, I think, beyond what I'm just doing in my day-to-day coverage. And so I hit up my agent, Stacy Glick, who's worked with me on a couple other books. And I said, hey, what do you think about what Judge and the Yankees are doing this year? Is there a book there? And her response was kind of, let's see. Let's wait and see what happens here. And so another couple months go by, and now the Yankees are in Anaheim, and Judge hit 50. And now you're looking at you're doing the math here, and you're saying, all right, he's got 50. It's August. 62 is happening. And that was right around when the national media started paying attention a little bit. ESPN was traveling with the Yankees just in case Judge hit a home run. It was kind of like, all right, how about now? And they were like, all right, let me make a few calls. And then sure enough, there was definitely interest in a book if he was able to get there. And so I started writing. Honestly, I guess I started writing probably in July. I started collecting. And then certainly by the time he hit 50 in Anaheim, I said, all right, I'm doing a book and I'm going to get ready just in case. And one of the great things about my job as the Yankees beat reporter for MLB.com is I'm there every day. So beyond what I was doing for my daily coverage for Yankees.com and MLB.com, I was kind of thinking long-term too about I might be doing a long-form book on this too. So definitely trying to do the ask the extra question, do the extra interview, try to get all the information I could. And a lot of it didn't show up, I guess, in my day-to-day coverage just because we were so focused on the here and now. And what I wanted to do was kind of tell a greater narrative on not just Judge chasing 62, but what that meant for Yankee history, for baseball history, and comparing it, contrasting it a lot with what Roger Maris went through 61 years prior, appropriately enough, in 1961. It was a completely different world. I mean, you're talking about newspapers versus Twitter and Instagram. And so just how much the world has changed since 1961, how different, how similar in some ways Judge and Maris were. I had a ball kind of exploring that. I feel like Judge's chase for 62 gave us a lot of jumping off points to talk about the Yankees today, Major League Baseball today, what it was like in 1961, what it was like in 1927 when Ruth was setting the first record. And so there was a ton there. And so it is a book about Judge, but it's also a book about the Yankees and baseball and this great home run record that Ruth, Maris, and Judge, three great players who all played the same position for the same team, different ballparks, different time periods, but they share that in common and kind of the through line between Ruth to Maris to Judge.
Yeah, I was going to kind of mention that I like the cool part you do that. You kind of go back to the Yankee past. And again, all ironically, right fielders, of course.
Yeah.
And now Roger Maris Jr. was kind enough to write the foreword for your book. And we kind of know his whole feelings on the 62 and versus the whole Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire. But nevertheless, did you have conversations with Maris or the Maris family as this was going on, as he was getting close to 61, 62?
Yeah, late in the chase, when the Maris family started coming around, I think that's when we started connecting on that, because I think when he was still around the 40s and the 50s, it was too far off. But once he got into the high 50s, it was like, all right, he's going to get there. And I think what was cool about that chase was having the Maris family tag along. And, I remember about in Toronto, Roger Maris Jr., he made it a point not to meet Judge. They didn't meet until Judge had already hit 61. And part of that was because so many people were pulling at Judge in every direction. Roger just didn't want to add more to that. And so he waited until he had tied his father. And then he finally embraced him. They shook hands, they hugged. And one of the first things he said to him was, what took so long? Why'd you make me wait? And so, because if you remember, he went to a bunch of home games at Yankee Stadium, and then they had to travel north of the border. They went up to Toronto. He did that there. And then finally, he tried to break the record at home and couldn't do it and had to settle for doing it in the second to last day of the year in Texas. And so I think that speaks to, this was not an easy record to break. It wasn't like Aaron Judge could just snap his fingers and get there. And as easy as he makes the game look at times, there was a lot of stress, a lot of strain that went into this. And there was drama there too. I mean, for a long time, we were seeing fans stand on their feet. I mean, I have so many videos on my cell phone of Judge not hitting 61 because we were all kind of holding our phones up and being ready just in case this was going to be the one. And so I think we were all kind of waiting with anticipation, and I thought he was going to do it, but until he actually did it, nobody could guarantee that or for sure. And so that's one great thing about it is the Yankees do this better than anybody else, I think, in baseball, is kind of connect with their past. And Yankee Stadium is a living museum in a lot of ways. And when you walk around there, even though it's a different building, you see Babe Ruth and you see Lou Gehrig and you see Joe DiMaggio and you see Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra, and they're all kind of incorporated in the building in some way. And there's photographs, not just of the current Yankees, but the past. And to actually have the bloodline, the lineage of the Maris family hanging around Judge and giving him their stamp of approval, I thought that was really cool, the way that all worked out.
Yeah, and also like with the book, you kind of chronicle each of the home runs he hits, and it was very detailed, each of those games. Like I remember the one in Pittsburgh where he hits the home run against former Yankee Manny Banuelos. So were those notes all just from your normal work with MLB.com? You just collected it all? I mean, or you did like additional research just to go back and look at those games?
Absolutely. Yeah, I went back to every single one. And obviously I was fortunate enough to witness most of them in person. And so I lived it firsthand in a lot of ways, but also going back in and kind of digging through because, all right, for example, that home run off Banuelos, I think it was a grand slam. In the moment, I mean, he was in the middle of the chase, but I didn't know how significant it was going to be. And if he had finished with 52 home runs like he did in 2017, we probably don't look back at that Manny Banuelos home run. So, and that's what I talk about. It gave us an opportunity to tell a lot of stories. And so it's a book about Judge, but it's a baseball book. It's a Yankees book. And I get to tell the story, for example, with that home run about Manny Banuelos and his life and his career and getting to the majors with the Yankees and, his long road. And he had a long wait. This guy was one of the hype prospects along with Andrew Brackman and Dellin Betances. And I got to kind of explore that a little bit too, about how his dream was to come in and pitch for the New York Yankees. And he had to wait. I think it was about 10 years to get there. He wound up in the Mexican League and then working his way all the way back. So I got to tell a lot of cool stories like that have come along in the course of my reporting for this book. And that it's about Judge, sure, but remember there was always a pitcher on the other side too, and they had a story to tell too, and all the people on the field had a story to tell. So I feel like it all came together like a very cool melting pot that I was able to explore.
Gotcha. And, what I guess you talk about, at the end of the day, how you kind of got the players to open up. You didn't necessarily say, hey, I'm writing a book about Judge's home run pursuit, but just kind of get what do you think about Aaron Judge, the man, the teammate? And through that, they were able to just get them to open up.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of it too. And then certainly once he had set the record and, my research for this continued through the offseason and even into spring training of this year. And so by the time I got to spring training and the contract was signed, I knew I was writing a book and I was kind of working in real time. And I was able to go around the clubhouse and say, all right, to guys, all right, hey, I'm doing a book on this. And so this is why I want to ask you about last June and last July and last August and kind of go back and retrace everything that they were going through as teammates cheering alongside him. And I think that one thing that sticks out to me about the chase compared to what Maris and Mantle went through in 1961 is that while Mantle and Maris were pushing each other and people were rooting for one or the other and most were pulling for Mickey, Judge was kind of by himself in this. And, the team was playing great in the first half. They fell off in the second half. Judge was one of the few reasons to keep watching that Yankee team as they went toward the postseason. And we all got caught up in that chase a little bit. And that was the same with the players. Garrett Cole was telling me about how, if you remember, the crowd got too quiet, and he would be standing there on the top step of the dugout raising his arms saying, come on, it's okay, you're allowed to cheer here, because it got silent at times and it was weird. And there were even times there where Judge would hit a double down the line or something and you hear the crowd go, oh. It's like, come on, what are we doing here? But I think that speaks to how swept up in it that we all got. And I speak about certainly us in the press box, I mean, it was Judge all day, all the time. You talk to people at the Yes Network, it was Judge all day, all the time. And the fans, I mean, it was clear that they had come to Yankee Stadium, 45,000 of them, to see one thing, and that was to see Judge hit a historic home run. And if they didn't get it, they left a little disappointed that night, even if the Yankees won.
Yeah, I remember that. I went to a lot of those games towards the end. I remember the Baltimore series. Pittsburgh came to town for a couple of games. The Boston series there. Yeah, just kind of remember that. Just like you could hear like a pin drop, just like you know, every when the pitcher released the ball. Just again, just talking to you, I'm just bringing back all those memories now. Now, just kind of feeling that electricity. And also, what Yankee history, I think you did a great job, is just to explain how a guy could just go through this. I think you paralleled a little bit with Judge and how he was raised, and I almost saw like a connection with almost Jeter and how his parents raised him. And was that what you were trying to get across?
There's definitely a connection there, yeah, and then obviously they're from different backgrounds. And Judge is adopted. He's he was raised by two school teachers in Northern California, and we know Jeter's career story about being raised in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and by Charles and Dorothy. And yeah, I think there's parallels there in that they were both raised in strong family units. And that's one thing that, obviously, of course, over the years, talking to Jeter and his family, that has come across in that. Look, they knew who was boss. Everything was kind of regimented in their way growing up, and they knew, Derek knew that he couldn't get away with stuff. He had to sign a contract with his dad to that he was going to keep his grades up, or else he couldn't play baseball. And there was a lot of that happening with Aaron Judge in Northern California too, in the mid to late '90s, and in that his parents were both school teachers. They were not going to allow him to do anything but put his studies first. And he told me a story about how, he would get frustrated with it at times. And we're talking about a very young Aaron Judge, probably 9 or 10 years old. And he would come home and he'd want to play video games, or he'd want to go out and ride bikes with his friends. And it was not until your homework is done. And so, he would come home and he would have to do that. And so I think that there's an echo there for sure of what Jeter's childhood was. And, I can draw a lot of parallels between them as Yankees captains. They're obviously completely different players. Derek was a shortstop who power was not his game. Judge has got the physique. He's an outfielder. Overwhelming power is his game. But I think that in terms of what they mean in that room, what they mean to this organization, what they mean in baseball in a lot of ways. I mean, they are both icons of Major League Baseball. And I think that if you're a fan of, I don't know, the St. Louis Cardinals, and I show you a picture of Derek Jeter or Aaron Judge, chances are you're probably going to know who that is. And that's not the case with some other teams and some other stars of this game. So I think the spotlight always shines brighter in the Bronx, and both these guys were built for it. They're different players, completely different players in a lot of ways, but their teammates looked to them to lead. They always did. They led by example. And I think that that's one thing I would say Jeter and Judge definitely have in common.
Yeah, I feel like we're spoiled. Yankee fans are spoiled the way, like, Green Bay fans were spoiled, like going Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and then back-to-back captains. We have Derek Jeter, and then now we get to Aaron Judge. And like, again, personality-wise, physically they're different, but they're the same. They're very humble, and again, that's why they're able to, handle these big moments. This is the way Jeter used to handle big moments in the postseason. So definitely, I can see the lineage between the two of them there.
So, yeah, no, I could definitely see that too.
So, like you mentioned in the book, you kind of go past, 62 and you go into the postseason, which I was kind of surprised. I mean, it could have been very easily just ended 62, roll the credits, everything's great, but you kind of cover the postseason as well. And then into the next season where obviously he signs the big $360 million deal. What made you kind of just push through the playoffs, even though the playoffs are obviously, kind of a downer for Yankee fans?
I'm not going to lie. I thought about it. The thought definitely crossed my mind, but I think that, yeah, to tie it up and say he hit 62 and hooray, everything's great. I thought that would be a easy way out. And that's not telling the complete story. And I think it is a big part of this story that he was spent by the end of the home run chase. It took so much out of him that he did not perform in the postseason. And I didn't want to gloss past that. And I didn't want to pretend that, all was hunky dory in the Yankees world. And they went on to have a great playoffs, because they didn't. That Houston series was awful. If you're a Yankee fan, they got swept, and it didn't seem particularly close. And I remember showing up in Houston the first game of that. I think it was the workout day before the series. Oh, no, it was definitely game one. And I was talking to Brian Cashman that day, and he said, we're going to have to play a perfect series to win this. And I said, ooh, that's not a good sign. But it was a sign that they knew they didn't have DJ LeMahieu. They knew they didn't have Andrew Benintendi. They were playing short, and Houston was so good. And I think that is a more complete picture of where the Yankees organization was in 2022. They had this great star, the greatest player in the game. He was going to win the MVP, just set this fantastic record, and still you're the underdogs in the postseason. And I think that that is a more complete story of where the Yankees were. And I didn't want to look past the fact that they got swept, and it was an awful end to the season. But then also that allowed me the jumping off point there into, all right, this was all taking place in the backdrop of a contract push. And he had been offered $213.5 million and turned it down on opening day. And I remember being in the press conference, I wrote down that number in my notepad and I looked at it and I said, it's a pretty good offer. I think I might have taken that. And Judge said, no, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going out there. I'm going to have a great season and I'm going to get paid like Mike Trout. And darn if he didn't. And he really, in so many ways, pitched a perfect game in his free agency, because he went out there and the Yankees had no idea what was going on. And there were so many stories out there. They were legitimately concerned, especially when the climax there is that Judge is flying to the winter meetings in San Diego, and Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone know he's not coming here to see us. So who is he coming to see? Is he going to sign with the Giants? Is he going to sign with the Padres? They didn't know about the Padres yet. That came later. But they knew, like, why is he coming here? Because it's not for us. And so I think that really sent chills down their spine that, we're going to lose this guy. And so that prompted Hal Steinbrenner, of course, to raise his offer, and it got done internationally. Hal was overseas and got it done at a highway rest area and essentially said, all right, if it's going to take 9 years, we're going to do 9 years for you. And, oh, by the way, Thurman Munson was my favorite player growing up, and I'd like to make him the captain just like you were. So it wasn't part of the negotiation. It was kind of a cherry on top after Judge had already said okay. But you can't tell the story without that part of it, because that's a huge part of it, the contract push, and then Judge, of course, being named captain at that press conference in New York.
Yeah. Now, I mean, did you feel there was any inkling that Judge might actually leave the Yankees, or you kind of felt deep down that just from covering him, just reading the room, that Hal was going to do whatever he can to get this guy to stay as a Yankee?
I was saying all along, and people were asking me that question, of course, in September and October, and I said, I feel like 80-20 he's going to stay. And that was pretty much my stance going into the winter meetings. And then once we found out about this flight, and then I saw, I could read it in people's eyes and their mannerisms around the Yankees, and they were legitimately terrified. They thought he was gone. Somebody came up to me in the lobby, somebody who works for the team, and said, did we lose him? And I said, shouldn't you know that better than me? And I said, I don't know, but it feels like the wind is blowing that way, that he's going to be a San Francisco Giant. And that was the day of the arson Judge tweet that John Heyman put out. And it was kind of like, that was the first time I thought, he might be going to the Giants. And he had never made any secret about, he grew up in San Francisco or near San Francisco, and was a Giants fan. Rich Aurilia was his favorite player. And then there was that article that came out in Time magazine about how he had fantasized about playing right field for the Giants, and he was going to marry his wife Samantha and play for the Giants, and that's what their life was going to look like. And I said, where is this all coming from? And it was a great smokescreen, honestly, in that contract negotiations, because I believe all of that put together prompted the Yankees to say, okay, we cannot let this guy go. Aaron Judge has to retire Yankee. He's a generational talent, and he has to stay. And whatever the contract is, we'll deal with it later.
Gotcha. And actually, surprisingly, it's not the first time Judge bet on himself. You tell a great story. I'm not going to get into detail, but after the 2016 season, he wasn't happy to his swing, so he kind of went outside the organization, and obviously, the current organization didn't like that. But actually, Judge was right. I mean, so really, no one should be surprised that Judge kind of, again, betting against himself in a way, but coming out victorious.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that that speaks to how driven he is, because you're right. That was in 2016. He had kind of found this swing guru who had helped him out, Richard Shank, and kind of overhauled his swing a little bit, helped him with something they call launch quickness and getting to the ball quicker. And if you look back at Judge in 2016, he came up, he had 179. He struck out a ton, and it did not look impressive. Yeah, he hit a home run in his first at bat, but other than that, there weren't very many highlights. And it was kind of like, all right, this could go one of two ways for this kid here. And, yeah, he's got an impressive physique, and, you can dream on it a little bit, but if he's going to hit 179, this isn't going to work. And so, yeah, he went outside the organization and kind of found this guy who based in Missouri who overhauled his swing a little bit. And you're right, the Yankees hitting coaches, they were not buying into this at all. And Joe Girardi didn't like it. They thought he was listening to the wrong people, and they would have much preferred, hey, listen to our guys. We're professionals. We know what we're doing. This guy runs a billiards hall in St. Peters, Missouri. But darn if it didn't work. And he had found something in his basement, kind of trying to mimic Barry Bonds' swing. And I can't say it would work for everybody. I don't think that it would work for me if I went to Richard Shank in Missouri, but it worked for Aaron Judge, no doubt. And I think it's helped make him the player he is. So he's willing to take chances, I think. And he's obviously got the personality where seems like the nicest guy in the room, but don't cross him and don't challenge him, I think, because he's got that fire in him. And I was talking to his college coach there, said, he's going to rip your heart out in a game competition, in a situation. Like, don't mess with this kid, because he's got a second gear inside him that he's out there to tear you apart, and he's going to win at the end of the day.
Yeah. Now, fans and readers can also visit your personal website. It's Bryan-Hoch.com, and it lists your previous titles and kind of tie that in with one of the books you did on the baby bombers, which, Judge in that group. Now, talk about the Yankee coaches, and again, it could be all coincidence, but we remember Gary Sanchez came to the scene. We had Gleyber Torres looking great early on, and then kind of their careers kind of went up and down a little bit. I mean, you think there's something to be said about that with this, like the development of these players, or it's just that was a totally different situation? Judge is a unique player.
Judge is definitely going to be the star of that baby bombers era for forever. And, yeah, it's up and down. And Gary had his moments where you thought, hey, it's a power hitting catcher who's hitting 30-something home runs a year, but obviously didn't work out that way. And Severino, you wonder what it would have looked like if he could have stayed healthy. And Greg Bird obviously never was able to put it together. And so that whole baby bombers era, I think, underscores how difficult it is to raise talent, to produce talent. And, you've got Judge, who's one of the great players in this game. And it's unfortunate that he's hurt right now and can't go to the All-Star game or can't play in the All-Star game, but he would have been there. And I think that those don't come along every day. There's a reason that they're so special. And so, you look back on that baby bombers era, and I feel like they missed a window there. There's no doubt about it. And I think that when you got to that Game 7 in Houston in 2017, and they were banging on the doorstep of the World Series, and say whatever you want about the 2017 Astros, and we don't have to go over all that, but it felt like they were so close. And then for them to kind of take a step backwards and never get that close again, part of it is, I think, the change in manager there, that you bring in Aaron Boone, and you think, all right, Boone's going to get them over the top because he can talk to these guys the way that Girardi can't. And then instead they kind of backslid a little bit, and in 2018, it's the Red Sox. In 2019, it's the Astros again. And then, the pandemic season in 2020. And they just haven't been able to get back to that point. And so, it's 14 years and counting now since the Yankees have played in a World Series. That's unacceptable, I think, by Yankee standards, and probably it should be by any team standards, but certainly by Yankee standards. And I think that, look, the fans deserve a team that can get back to the World Series. And I thought they were going to get there with that 2017 crew, because that was a fun team to cover. And, it's unfortunate they backslid a little bit. 2019, they got close, but they've never gotten closer since then.
I agree. And those 3 home games in the Bronx, when you just totally see the Astro players were completely rattled, but unfortunately, they fell short. Now, another one of your interesting previous titles is the Bronx Zoom, the bizarre 2020 season. Now, you've lived through this whole thing. Now in 2023, is everything kind of fully back in terms of press access to players and behind the scenes, or are there still some things carried over from 2020 that's still in place?
No, it's amazing. That year was weird. And you and I are doing this interview on Zoom, so this feels like familiar territory for 2020. But at the ballpark, everything's almost the way back to 2019. And you're seeing full houses of 45,000 people again. Thank goodness, because I never want to go through anything like 2020 was again. That was a hard season, I think, for everybody involved. Aaron Boone referred to it as a heavy season, and I agree with him. It just felt like there was so much going on that year beyond the pandemic, and you had social justice was happening in the background, and this contested presidential election, and it just felt like life was a drag. And there was a baseball season played in the middle of it, and obviously that book is not about a World Series winning Yankee team. It's more about kind of the strain and stress that was on that 2020 season, and me being there on the day that everything paused in March of that season in spring training. You're having a regular, normal spring training, and Garrett Cole is excited to begin his Yankee career, and everything seems like it's going to be a great year, and then just poof, and then we don't even get back to the park until July, and it was scary, and nobody knew what the heck was going on a lot of the time, and you had games being canceled because of COVID exposure, and there was just so much crazy stuff happening that I feel like that book, when I was writing it, I was said, in 5 years from now, this is all going to be back to normal, and I'm going to want to remember how freaking crazy this all was. And I feel like, we're halfway there now, and I feel like hopefully in 2 years I pick that book up again and I say, geez, how did we play a baseball season under all of that? And so hopefully I'll pick that up again in about 2 years, and I'll give it a read through again.
Yeah, and Ken, baseball fans can visit your website, Bryan Hoch, to check all his previous titles. So, of course, your latest book now, 62, Aaron Judge, the New York Yankees in the Pursuit of Greatness. So is there any central theme, or what's any goal you hope that readers take away, after they finish this book?
I want people to appreciate how hard it was for Judge to do this. And obviously we know 62 is the American League record. It's not the Major League record. I still believe 73 is. I know that Roger Maris Jr. would disagree with me, but I watched Barry Bonds do that with my own eyes. I watched Mark McGwire hit 70. I watched that Sosa McGwire chase. It happened. I just look at it differently than I do what Judge did last year. And so, now that we know that they were steroid enhanced, and I think we kind of put those aside and say, all right, that's in a different category than what I just saw with Aaron Judge. And that's why I focus so much on the lineage between Ruth and Maris and Judge. And one of the real fun parts about this book was doing a lot of the historical research and digging into newspaper clippings from 1961, kind of recreating that season. There were obviously a lot of books written about 61 that I used as reference material, but there's not many of the 61 Yankees still around firsthand. And what I wanted to do was get to as many of them as I could to talk, or many people who were around Maris at any time, to talk to them, not just about Roger, but about Aaron Judge and the connection between the two of them. And two of the active players who are still with us, thankfully, are Tony Kubek and Bobby Richardson. And I got both of them for the book to talk about not just Maris, but Judge. And so that is one of my favorite things, is that I feel like it's a book about Judge, it's about the Yankees, but it's about baseball history too. And, I've always loved that. And so I think it's cool to kind of have those people populating this chase for 62 as it's going on.
Okay, Bryan, well, I appreciate this time. And fans, again, books available today, July 11th. They go on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Again, 62, it's Aaron Judge, the New York Yankees in the Pursuit of Greatness. Do you have any events coming up or signings where fans can maybe meet you in person?
I'll be tweeting out information about that, and you can come on out and get a signed copy of the book. We'll talk some baseball. We'll talk Yankees. It's during the All-Star break, so you can get that information on my website at bryan-hoch.com.
Well, thank you for your time, Bryan. I'm sure the book's going to be a hit. Dad joke.